Hi,
Hello.
welcome to the Mom Project's Masterclass, Tackling the Trickiest Career Gaps. My name is Elizabeth Shackelford. I am the Senior Partner of PR and Social here at the Mom Project, and I am so excited to welcome you and moderate today's discussion with our return to work experts, Susan and Kelley from Prepare to Launch You. In today's session, Susan and Kelley will speak about positioning yourself for job search success after an extended career break, unexpected life circumstances, or prolonged unemployment. All right, well, let's get started.
All right.
Just a reminder, we'll have time for audience questions at the end of the presentation, and a recording of this session will be made available to all attendees. Okay, I'll kick it over to you both.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. We are so happy to be back here with our Mom Project community, talking about one of our favorite topics, that career gap, but the trickiest, tackling those trickiest career gaps. And we know as career experts, just tackling gaps, how hard it can be for these particular instances. And we'll get into that.
And you may have actually attended some of our other webinars with the Mom Project where we talked about the long career gap, but here we're talking about 3 different inflection points in that gap that can make one struggle a little bit more with explaining it. Exactly. And that's really the big challenge. So a little bit about us first.
Yeah, so we'll go to that next slide. So we're both moms of 4.
This is Kelley. I'm Susan, by the way. If you don't know.
Yes, and we both took caregiving career breaks, and we successfully returned to work.
And between us, we have over 30 years of experience in this very narrow field of women and work and helping people across the globe now manage the two or navigate the two. And we are widely recognized experts. Obviously, we have the stamp of approval from the Mom Project as the people who really understand this unique niche.
Right. And with the help of our clients and our students from across the globe, they are consistently landing. We just heard a couple of lands this week, which is really exciting for some of our students. But really working in this space of that tough to explain career break.
Yeah. So we're here to talk to you about this today, and you're in the right place if you've taken that career gap and you perhaps have experienced divorce or you've experienced a loss of some type. Maybe it's been the loss of a spouse, caring for an ill family member or a special needs child. We see these things all the time in our programs and in our courses. But these are the trickiest. Those 3 are definitely the trickiest.
Right. So let's hop to that next slide. And let's really just put a spotlight on divorce first. So Suze, give us a little bit of color as to what that encompasses when we're talking about this tricky break.
The hardest part that we've seen is when the divorce is unexpected.
Yeah.
And so typically, if you know you're going to be returning to work, and let's face it, 43% of us in the women's workplace, exclusive of COVID, take career breaks. Right. And the majority, the vast majority of them want to return. But often when we see returners coming through that have been through divorce, it's emotionally taxing. Yes. Sometimes it's financially draining because now you have 2 households to pay for. And if it comes somewhat unexpectedly or on an accelerated timeline, you may not have had time to get yourself ready to go back to work. So that can be a really tricky one. And of course, in any divorce situation, whether the woman is initiating it or not, there's that compromise of confidence.
Absolutely. And giving yourself the time and space to navigate that and heal from that is always important. But we just want to today put that highlight on how we can really help you tackle it from the divorce perspective when you have a career gap. The next one we're going to hop into is the prolonged illness and or death of a family member. So let's talk a little bit about that, because that is one that is highly emotionally charged.
And we saw it, but often when we saw it in our courses or see it in our courses, we don't know.
Right.
Until we've met them. All we know is that the woman's taking our course because she's taken a long break.
Exactly.
But then we find out that she was caring for a spouse who might have passed away or not. Right. We have a lot of students who've taken career breaks, maybe longer than they planned because they have a child whose needs are not being well met by the public schools. Absolutely. So learning disability or physical disability. And so these, again, can be emotional breaks. They can be financially depleting. They can also cause, we just had a call earlier today with a woman who had to leave work because her children's needs weren't met in the schools and she homeschooled.
Right.
So lots of things here that are make it emotional and can create that perception of a little bit of baggage, right?
Right. Well, and I think there's this two part to this. There's that professional side that's, that's getting a gap, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the personal side of this is something I might need to do some healing from as well. So the last one we're going to talk about, and this one actually has really become more, we're hearing this more and more in our courses with our students after COVID,
For sure.
or through COVID, wherever we are in COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's personal illness, and that could be physical, something physically that's happened to you, but it also could be that mental health piece. So let's talk a little bit about
I think this is the hardest one to overcome because there are just a lot of landmines in trying to navigate. What do I say? What don't I say? But again, this is a highly personal break, and it's one that's difficult to explain and also can be that very big lapse of confidence in coming back. Typically, these are not as long as the other two. But again, these are all breaks that need to be explained. They just need to be explained in the right way. And that's what we're here to
I
teach you.
also want to say that divorce and, dealing with an illness or of a family member or whatever may also inform the third, right?
That's
it's
exactly
like
right.
you can
That's
maybe,
exactly
sort of clean up from all of these other things, and then your own physical or mental health has been impacted. So, so we have lots of tips for you. We have lots of tips for you on how to handle this. So let's go up to that. Let's go to the next slide. And we're going to really dive into the why, the when, and the how, and the where of tackling these tricky career breaks.
So what makes these why they're tricky is because when you've taken this break, you haven't had time, either because you were unprepared or because you're caring for someone or yourself. You don't have time, if you come to our other workshops, to find, part-time work or take on a project here or be a leader in your community when you're dealing with any one of these situations. Right. If it's a divorce, you may have, but again, if it's coming on you unexpectedly, you may not have had time to really develop those skills. Right. So that's the why these are trickier than, say, a traditional career break to stay home while your kids are in school.
Right. So when is really important. And what we mean by when is when you have to explain it,
right.
When you have to really fill that gap.
And I would say even before COVID, if you had a brief break of up to 2 years, you really didn't have to explain it. Now, post-COVID, no one is ever going to question a resume that says, has nothing from 2020 to 2022.
Right. So there's some grace.
Exactly.
We got some grace here.
Exactly. So it's really not even necessary diving into it.
Right. But then the how piece of it, how are you actually going to do this? I think that's probably why everybody's here today.
Right.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's just acknowledge that it does have to be addressed. If it's a longer break, you just can't put down the last time I worked was 2004. That's just, no one's going to look at your resume. No one's going to talk to you. So you have to explain it. You have to explain it strategically and honestly and briefly and not too much. And that's the key. Yeah. We find, we just did this just before this call. We were working with a group on storytelling, and we were like, figure out which details need to be explained, but they don't need to know. And then my husband left me, and then we lost our home. And then there is the belief that this is going to show me as having great grit and being resilient. But really, I can say this as a hiring manager, all I'm thinking is that's too much. I don't want to deal with that.
Yeah. And not everybody has earned the right to hear that story. Those are very personal stories that are important to you, that you lived through. And there is a very small portion of your world that has earned the right to hear the depths of that story. And it's not on an interview, and it's not in a networking call. It's for those people that what we call your tribe.
People that support you.
Right. Exactly. But there is ways to use that so it empowers the conversation, so people can see that grit and resilience. What is it? You tell them about what Forbes was saying. What was Forbes saying?
I think it was Forbes maybe 4 years ago, 4 years ago. They did a poll of CEOs of the Fortune 500, and they said, what are the 5 qualities, not skills, that you look for in an employee? And agility and grit were right in the top 3. And the collaboration was there, teamwork, I think. But agility and grit. Agility because the job market changes so quickly with technology. Jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago are now top of the heap. And grit because we need to be able to rely on our teammates to endure and be resilient through unexpected times. I mean, look what we've just been through the last couple of years, right?
So if you are a woman that is sitting out there that has lived through any one of these 3 tricky gaps, just know like your grittiness is needed in the workplace. It's absolutely needed in the workplace. All right. So we are going to talk about also where we're going to explain these things. And they're nuanced, right? In different ways. But
so the resume is one place, and there will be some explanation of that. LinkedIn, also how you present it in a networking call, and then how you present it in an interview.
Right. All right. Let's go to that next slide. So we are going to start with just this mindset piece, because you can often be your biggest obstacle when it comes to thinking about where do I even begin in talking about this gap? And oftentimes your mindset is not right. You are thinking of this time that you have taken away from the workforce as baggage. I can't do this. It could be this defeated feeling. You've been through this really painful, maybe contentious divorce, or you've lost a loved one, or you yourself have just physically overcome some major illness, and you can just be in that defeated mindset. Who is going to hire me after all of this?
Or how am I ever going to do it even if I do get hired?
Exactly. And then there's that shame piece. That shame mindset can run you as well. And that's, I'm embarrassed. I don't want people to know that I got a divorce. I don't want them to know that I'm falling apart. I've fallen apart. Those mindsets will run you. And if you can identify that you are stuck in one of those mindsets, that's step number 1. That's just giving you an understanding of, I can't talk to myself anymore this way about getting myself back out there, because it's defeating me. It's holding me back, and it's not allowing me to move myself forward. So just identifying how you're speaking to yourself in your mind. If you're talking in a way that you are baggage, that you have too much baggage, if you're feeling defeated, or if you're talking in a shame mindset, that can really run you. And so our default behaviors when we are stuck in one of those mindsets are to avoid or ignore, like, what break, or, I'm going to be so busy and I'm going to be doing for everyone else. I don't even have the time to really make this happen for me. And then another thing that we do, we opened up with this on the last slide, of that oversharing. And like I said, you do not have to share the depths of your story with anyone that has not earned the right to hear it. And there is this nuanced way to use it that very powerfully when you are job seeking, but it is not something that you have to go in the depths with, and you don't want to go into the depths with, because that can hold you back and be an obstacle too.
So we're going to move ahead now to the next slide. We're going to teach you the sweet spot between oversharing and avoiding ignoring,
right?
Because we want you to be powerful, both internally and in your delivery. We want you to be memorable. And as someone who in her career has interviewed hundreds of people in a week, sometimes, I need you to be memorable. You need you to be memorable. And then mostly hireable.
Yeah.
So there are slightly nuanced approaches to those 3 different types of gap. We'll start with the divorce gap.
Right. And the structure that we're going to work you through is sort of this idea of mining, of pitching, and then closing. So that's going to be the format that we're going to follow.
And
here.
for those of you who are note takers, just know that we do have a downloadable file, or 4-page little workbook that provides this template for you.
Yeah.
So you don't need to write notes.
My project's going to send that out in a follow-up.
So when we say mine, we mean kind of like dig through your experience. And of course, the longer your gap and the older you are, the longer that process will take. But if you've been divorced, there's a chance that, or if you're in the process of divorce, that at some point during your break, you might have taken on a paid gig. And that could be as small as every year I go help my sister with a trade show.
Yep.
That's still work, and it belongs on a resume.
Yep.
You might have taken on a part-time job, and perhaps it's been a slightly lower level job than you're used to, yet it still needs to be represented. It shows that you've had initiative, and you can always go through those things and find those experiences and skills that relate to what you want to do.
Right.
And we certainly, if you're falling into this area where you did have some volunteer work, maybe a little bit of paid work, maybe some leadership roles, all those kinds of things in your past, you'll want to look at the Mom Projects. I think it was probably about a year and a half ago, webinar that we did on returning to work after a long career break, because we dive deep into how do you find those things in your experience.
Right. And we also did one in December on the actual like filling the gap on your resume.
Right. The tactics for doing that.
And I think there's a freebie that went along with that too.
I think probably with both.
Yeah.
But the point being that if you were out for a mental health break or a physical health break, or you were out for an intense caregiving break, you probably didn't have time to do these things. But a divorcee may have had time. So step one is just look for those opportunities and write them down. You want to focus on the skills that you've acquired and the achievements that you've made.
Right. And then the next place you're going to go is pitching it. So Suze, break that down. What does that even like?
Yeah.
Break it down.
So you kind of look at your career in chapters. So there was the early career where you had a job, and some of you probably had big jobs and had, high level positions with large spans of control and big deliverables. And then you have this break where you might have worked very little, but maybe you volunteered a little too. And then this third chapter is where you want to go. The biggest mistake we see people make, even the ones who are pretty good at talking about what they did before and kind of mining for those valuable experiences in between, don't connect the dots. So I, as a hiring manager, understand where it's going. So connecting the dots means, for example, well, you can see early in my career, I was in the digital world. I was on the sales side. I moved into an account executive role and ultimately left there at a director level, managing multiple teams globally. It was a job that I loved. So now I just covered very briefly in 10 seconds, chapter 1. And then I made the difficult decision, and this is important to say, I made the sacrifice of leaving a career that I loved to be a caregiver. I had children, and the way I like to teach our students to say it is, I'm an all-in person. I don't give 50%. So I was given the choice of either going all in my career, which would have made me the kind of parent I didn't want to be, or going in all in parenting, which would have made me have to sacrifice my career. And that's what I chose to do. But during that time, aside from managing a large and busy household, I was able to do these 2 or 3 things. Yeah. And now I'm here. And I actually look at this experience in the middle as building on my experiences before, because those skills that I learned when I was working in management and leadership, I brought into my home life, into my community. And now I'm looking to bring them further back, full circle, to come back to where I left off.
Right. So do you see how she's connecting the dots for that hiring manager to understand, here's who I am, here's chapter 1, here's chapter 2, and then we're going to talk about the close. So close, Suze, what is that?
I think you've got to look at each one of these scenarios and find the superpower just in the situation. And so what often we perceive as a liability can be an asset if we just turn our thought process in a different position.
This is how we combat those negative mindsets.
Yeah.
We stop looking at it as a liability and we start to look at it as an asset.
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, the liability might be, I'm a single mom and I'm like over my head. I'm trying to like hold up a mortgage, and now I've got my own place. I've got the kids.
And there are moments when you will feel like that. That's reality. However,
you don't show that on the interview. What you say is, as a primary earner. Now, you'll know I have not said I'm divorced. You've gone through all of these other things. You've connected the dots, and you might just say at the end when they say, "Is there anything else you'd like me to know about you?" Well, yeah, I think it's important to know that I'm a primary earner in my household. That doesn't mean you're depressed. There are many women who are the primary earners in their household. But by saying that and saying so, I know that you've probably met a lot of candidates who have equal credentials, perhaps some with even more conventional experience than me. But I am extremely driven as a primary earner in a household. I want to come to work. I don't want to just meet my targets. I want to exceed them. And that's why you should hire me.
Exactly. You're hungry and you're eager.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's divorce.
So now caregivers next.
Yeah. So let's dig into that caregiver. Now remember there's a number of different scenarios that are falling under there. So this is illness of a spouse or a loved one. This is also for those of you who maybe took a caregiving break for a child. That's not us. Yeah, that was us.
That's not good. That's good. Okay. So this one, if you've taken an extended caregiving break, you probably didn't have a whole lot of time, especially if you had a special needs child or a severely ill spouse or family member, to do the gig work, do the part-time work, do the leadership in the community. If you have, then treat it the way we talked about it on the prior slide. But if you haven't, we want you to look at the transferable skills that you've developed in that role.
Right.
We're not big believers in talking about, what do we say, like CEO mom or, homemaker engineer, what's the one that's
well, we're not being
what's the one that people say? Domestic engineer.
Yeah.
We don't want you talking about that. We don't want you focusing about those things. But there are other things that you do just by virtue of being that kind of caregiver that matter. So it could be advocacy. It could be advocating in the school system to have your child's and other children's needs met. It could be power of attorney, probate work if you were dealing with elderly parents. It could be you might be the executor of an estate and had to do that level of probate work.
Healthcare.
Navigating the healthcare system, talking to insurance companies to make sure claims are paid. If you're doing any type of dealing with special needs children on the education front, you might also be advocating at the state and local level to make sure that those needs are met or that alternative learning methods are appreciated, like homeschooling, which we see quite frequently.
So this is what we mean by mining. There is value in what you have done, even if you think I've just been totally focused on this, so I wasn't focused on the workplace. Yes, you have. There are transferable skills here. So how do we pitch this one, Suze?
Yeah. So again, it's connecting the dots. So I'm going to use Roseanne as an example.
Okay.
So we had a student who graduated from our course who met us on our first Mom Project webinar, and she had worked in the freight industry on the client relations side in the 90s and early 2000s. And then she had premature twins, both with special needs, and she soon became a single parent. So for 18 years, she was caregiving for premature children. And then once they went to school, she was advocating for their needs within the Chicago public schools. Not a small system, required a lot of navigation. And she very boldly put right on her resume in that 18-year gap that she worked as an educational advocate for the Chicago public schools. And then she wrote what she did, because her work on behalf of her two children benefited many other children. What she was able to get legislated, what she was able to get the school systems to agree to in terms of financial and resource support benefited not just her children, but others. She landed a job at Flexport, which is a Bay Area company that's kind of taken the work she did in the 90s and early 2000s and made it more of a digital application. And they're in the news now because they're a big freight transporter. So they're helping move through some of these supply chain issues that we're all faced with due to COVID. So she navigated using this strategy. She's not the only one, but she's one that's top of mind. Yeah. This works.
Right. And so we want to just talk about that close piece because that's a big element in this 3 steps. Yeah.
So Roseanne did that. She did it in the resume by talking about how many stakeholders benefited. But in conversation, she talked about how, look, I realize that this work is highly unconventional. But again, harking back to what she first did. But, when I was navigating major accounts and trying to get their shipping contracts and then executing as a project manager to make sure those things were fulfilled, I used a lot of those skills in this last job. I was navigating the second biggest school system in the country. I was doing it alone and I was successful. And the way I was successful was the same way I was successful in my last job. I know how to push and when to push. I know how to read my audience. I do my research. I'm well prepared. And when necessary, I know how to use charm and diplomacy to make things work.
And many of you sitting there right now listening to this, your work that you did in your first chapter absolutely informed this gap time in some way, shape, or form. So don't forget that. And just don't miss that point. Don't miss that point. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
This is the toughest one.
Yes, this is definitely the toughest one. And this is up and coming. There is a real reality that is playing out. We see it because of the intimate work that we do. There is a real need for just mental health and focus on mental health. And many people that left the workforce during COVID left the workforce because they needed this mental health break. So we need to address it. We don't know where what do you say? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would love to think my mom is a psychologist. She is 84 years old and still in practice. She's my inspiration.
Yeah, she's all of our inspiration.
Kelley hopes it lasts that long too. But we know that there's such a demand for mental health services because, as Kelley said, there's so many challenges for our mental health. But I don't believe we are at the point yet where you can go into an interview and say, I took a 6-year break for mental health issues.
Do you feel the same about physical illness? Like, say if you had cancer or, something like that, do you feel the same about
Not to the same degree, but I do, only because if you are in a competitive hiring situation, even the most kind hiring manager, if he's faced with somebody who is fully healthy as far as he knows, and someone who's already shared had a terminal, not a terminal, but a serious illness, I just think, and again, to your point earlier, they don't need to know that. Right. So the way we advocate you presenting this is talking about a family member. We have 2 recent grads who were in this situation, and it worked for them. They are both landed. One of them is at Oracle, and the other one, I forget. But these are people who have landed jobs using the strategy. So they talk about how, during that break, these breaks tend to be shorter. So there's not such a big divide between your professional experience and your break, which can be an advantage. And you need all the advantages you can in this situation. So basically, you're going to look at those things that you did, the same things that you did if you were caregiving for someone else. If you're caregiving for yourself, you are navigating the healthcare system. You might be doing some advocacy work. You might be working with the advocating on the health plan.
Research.
Definitely doing research on alternative treatment. So all the things that you would do for a family member, you would do for yourself. So you're going to call yourself a family member. All you have to say is, I took a 4-year caregiving break to help a family member recover from illness. And during that time, I repurposed, this is the pitch, I repurposed some of the skills that I had honed over my years as an attorney. And I've done tons of research, advocacy, pushing back and negotiating to make sure that things were covered that weren't normally covered or that were being challenged. And now that we are all back on our feet, I'm ready to dive back in. And I want to look at that experience in the middle as being really, maybe not equally, but certainly complementary in value to what I did before. And I think what it does also is it informs my humanity. I mean, we all face challenges as we get older, right? And especially when you're talking to somebody young that might not get it, at some point you'll probably face a similar challenge where something's got to give. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate. I was able to take the time off. I prepared financially, but I'm ready to get back. And I've got bringing that complement of experience and that humanity that allows me to be that much more empathetic with my clients, to meet them where they are, and to hopefully pitch them with even better success.
Yeah. And so do you see in all 3 of those, you are telling a story, you are telling your story, but you are telling it in the most powerful way for job seeking, mm-hmm. not for your best friend. Okay.
Right. That's one thing that I forgot to mention on this one is, especially if you haven't had time to do much volunteering or, if you're focusing on more of those advocacy and research things, also talk about the qualities. I mentioned earlier, Kelley prompted on that 5 qualities companies look for. Since we really don't know what the workplace is going to look like in 5 years because it changes so rapidly, employers, hiring managers are having to really look at what is the color of the person? What's the profile of the person that we want to hire? Right. Whereas 10 years ago, it was really more skills centric. Skills continue to be important, but the ability to be agile, the ability to be resilient, the ability to have that grit to dig into mm-hmm. is really becoming maybe not quite equal, but certainly a very large factor in a hiring decision. So you show that through your stories.
Right. So see this as a superpower mm-hmm. when you go in for an interview, or if you're networking with someone, see it in from that perspective. You're going to feel so much more confident and more powerful when you are there. All right. Well, let's move to the next slide and just really break it down. The 3 essential messages for explaining any career break. So what is number 1?
This is true for really any break beyond 2 or 3 years. The first one is, you're always going to set it up this way in your own language. I loved my work, and I was really good at it.
You might want to take a screenshot of this.
I think I put that it's in the workbook too.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a slide I just added because I thought they need to know this. So I loved my work. It was a big sacrifice for me to leave it. I was really good at it. I was advancing, build it up. But given my alternatives at the time, I'm really glad I made that choice. It was the right decision.
Right.
So that's the first step. That's how you set it up. The second one is now you're talking about the gap. So the first one is you're reminding them how great you are and how yet you had lots of opportunity where you were, but you made a choice because of your humanity to leave. Then the second piece is during that time, I tapped into and I actually grew and perfected all of those professional skills and expertise that I had begun to develop in my career. And I brought those to my community, or I brought those to my family, doing advocacy or being a leader in my community, whatever your story is. And in the process, and this was kind of a surprise because truth be told, I was a bit of a snob. I came from the corporate world and I'm thinking that, what am I going to learn when I'm working in the school system as a volunteer? Well, you know what? I did. I learned some new skills that I also bring with me now. I carry those forward.
Right.
And then the third part is kind of the close. So whatever your situation was, everything is fine. My parents' estate is settled and they're in a nursing home or
everything's under control.
Even if it's not, because we all know it's not.
Listen, if you knew the circus behind the scenes in this place, we all live it. We are moms and we all live it, but everything's under control.
And you have to say it. And we used to say fake it till you make it, but now we say fake it till you become it. Mm-hmm. This might be a little bit more fake it. Just fake it. But you're going to say, I'm ready and eager. Everything is established at home. I'm ready and eager to bring my professional training and experience and all those interesting things that I developed during that time back to the workplace. And this is the other piece of it. And I'm in the process. This is where you show them that they're not the only ones shopping, you are too. And I'm looking at lots of opportunities right now. I'm really keeping my options open. But so far, what I've seen from your company, and this could take place in a cover letter or in a first interview with a recruiter, or even at the end with a hiring manager, based on what I'm seeing about your organization today, or what I've seen over the last couple of weeks, I'm really feeling like this might be the best place for me. Mm-hmm. So now you're also setting it up that I'm an asset, and you might have to fight to get me.
Yeah. I have options. I do want to say a little something about what we're saying with everything's under control. You say that here and we're going to break it down in what gets put in the resume, what gets put in the LinkedIn profile, what gets in networking and interviews. But the boundaries that you need to set and the structures that you need in place for you to do your work well, so that you really do have it under control. Part of that comes after you've gotten the offer and you're negotiating, mm-hmm. right? For that's when you're going to have you're going to be very clear. And maybe that's a follow-up. Maybe that's something that
that'll be our next thing, Jennifer.
Yeah, maybe that might be another one.
That's one of the favorite things to teach, too.
Exactly. But that is when you're talking about that. So here you are, everything's under control, but you are a good boundary setter. Even if you're not, we'll teach you how to be one. But
she'll teach you.
Yeah. Then you're able to ask for those things that you need in that compensation package that is a part of the negotiation of your salary and all that business. Okay. Another day, another
But it
time.
all starts, right? This is the foundation, just the very beginning of building that confidence back so that you have that ability to ask for more.
Exactly. All right. So let's move on to this next slide. And what we wanted to do is we want to break down, okay, so I'm going to be mining, I'm going to be pitching, I'm going to be doing all of those things, but where and how, so when it comes to the resume and the LinkedIn profile, what are the ground rules for what goes on those,
I think the general ground rule is that right now we're spending 45 minutes talking to you about this, so it's getting a lot of spotlight, but in the context of your job search and you pitching yourself, it gets a teeny bit.
Yeah.
The key is that teeny bit is very strategically mapped out.
Yes.
Pieces of elements of it are practiced over and over again, so they're delivered smoothly. In terms of a resume and a LinkedIn, you want to present your break the same way you do your working years. So I know that a lot of people are out there pitching functional resumes where you just talk about all the things you've learned, and at the bottom you kind of list your experience. As a hiring manager, I'll tell you right now, I see one of those and I throw it away. Don't make me work so hard. You get 6 to 8 seconds of my attention, and I'm saying me as representing the avatar of recruiters and hiring managers. Don't make it hard for me to figure out what you did where. Be bold and be honest. So show me. And just like the Roseanne example, educational advocate, Chicago Public Schools, Chicago, Illinois, 2005 to present.
You definitely want to go back and watch our resume gap.
I think it's the resume
what
gap.
Was that?
One.
It was the one in December.
if you want the real specifics on how to do
yes,
this,
how to do
okay?
that. Yep.
And you're going to focus the same way you would on a resume, on the professional side of your resume, on your actions, on the context or the scale of what you've done, and on accomplishments and, where possible, measurable results, not responsible for, no general statements.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first one. The second one is a little more subjective. You can call it a career break. And the Mom Project advocates using Mom Pause, which is a great strategy if you have a shorter career gap. But if you've been out for 5, 10, 15, some of our students are 24 years. And again, as a hiring manager, I see career break from 1998 to present. I'm not going to look at you. You have to tell me what you've done. And you've got to do your best job of telling me something. All right. Most recruiters and hiring managers are good people. If you tell them a story, even if it's not maybe the one they understand or the one they were hoping to hear, they'll appreciate that you were confident in the delivery and they will give you a listen. But if you just leave it blank, it'll be nothing. So I think on LinkedIn, you have a choice now. They have added this career breaks section. We're a little ambivalent about it. I think in general, if the experience that you've had, that you can make it sound good enough and professional enough that it's not obvious that you left corporate America to start your own consulting firm to do 2 projects a year because you're a mom, then you can just leave it as the work. If it's harder for you, and for most of you it will, you'll probably want to use that career break section. And again, as Kelley said, share very little. Took a family caregiving break due to a seriously ill family member, and then write down what you did. Okay. And then the last is, make sure this matters for the paper resume. Most of you, if you're over 40, you pretty much have a 2-page resume, and probably over 35. Make sure that whatever that punchy professional experience, the stuff that's going to really excite a manager, is on above the fold, we say, but on the first page. So that may mean you have to truncate some of the earlier stuff in your resume so that I can see all the educational advocacy or healthcare advocacy or probate work that you did. But I also see that before that you worked at IBM on that first page.
Right.
All right.
Okay. So that is resume and LinkedIn, but let's talk a little bit more about the interview and that networking.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the ground rules there? Again, we're not shedding a ton of light on this,
Right.
but we are here today with all of you because we're teaching you that niched out strategy that you can use. So talk about this, talk them through how this would work in an interview or a networking.
So the thing is, all of you will be most nervous about and most preoccupied by, oh my God, I want to get that question about what I did for the last 10 years, right? So what we advocate, because that's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
If I'm a hiring manager and you get through my whole interview and I never ask you about what you did for 12 years and as an educational advocate or navigating the healthcare system, then either A, I never looked at your resume, and when you leave, I'm going to see it and I'm going to have a bunch of questions, which I will answer myself and never to your advantage. Or B, I've already written you off. So you have to answer that question. And we recommend that you ask it and answer it yourself, that you start with it and get it over with. Because once you get it over with, you will not be thinking about it the whole time.
Exactly.
And you'll be in charge. Instead of reacting, I hate proacting, but you will be proactive here. I hate that word, but it's a good use of it.
Well, and it will run you.
Right. It will.
And especially for many of you, these are very emotionally charged. These may have been some of the darkest moments of your life. And if you are holding that in on an interview and then you're nervous and maybe things didn't go so smoothly as you were getting out
and
the
distracted,
door and you're feeling a little amped up and then adrenaline starts going, then it's very easy. Those tears could be right under the surface. So this is also something that you want to make sure that you are practiced around, but we'll talk about the elements of it.
So a good way to introduce it and not wait is at the beginning of an interview. 90% of interviews begin with some type of general, like, well, tell me about yourself, Kelley. And so this is a great way to say it. Well, you can see from my resume that I started out in tech and I had a great marketing career. And then I pivoted over to sales and I was doing big business development. I did some global work. And when I left, I was a director. And it was a tough decision for me to leave, frankly. I loved my work. I was being promoted, kind of the same thing we just role played before. Then talk about what you've done during your break, a little bit of airtime, and then end it with, and I'm here today because fortunately, let's say it was kids, my kids are grown, or if it was an illness, my spouse has recovered, or if it's parents, whatever it is, we've overcome those challenges It was time well spent, but I am so excited to bring both what I learned during those recent years and the trajectory I was already on before I left, and resume where I left off and come back.
Right. So talk about that following the 90-10.
Yeah. Oh, right. So you got that kind of gets that question out of the way. Then the rest of the interview is going to be talking about your skills, your experiences, your achievements, your accomplishments, not about what happened at home. Right. And I think the next one is the third one is own the narrative. If they come back to you and ask more about your break, just redirect it. That's just redirect it. So if someone says, so tell me more about your break, and you say, you know what, there's really not a whole lot more to say. I mean, this is a pretty common occurrence. 43% of women do this in our country. It's probably more now. It's an unfortunate decision to have to make, but it was a good one for me. And I went into this thinking I knew everything. Well, let me tell you something. I didn't know the depths of my resilience. I didn't know the depths of my resourcefulness until I had to go up against Cigna. But really, I would prefer spending more of our time talking about my skills than a circumstance over which I had no control.
Exactly.
So that also, when you go like that to an interviewer, it's a really nice way of saying you're being a jerk. Right? And just bringing it back home. And these are important things to show, because all of you, your default mode is going to be, I'm desperate. I'll be lucky to get anything. I can't believe I'm even here. I can't believe he's talking to me. And once you can get to the point where you can say, no, we're not going back there. Yeah. It really changes the dynamic of the interview, which is really important.
If you survived those things that we are highlighting today, then an interview, this is like small fry, because you have that in you. That's a part of your capacity of who you can be in the world. And the other thing I want to say about, it's like the nice way of saying you're not a jerk. And it's also the nice way of saying I have boundaries, and there are things that are off limits to you. Yeah. And, those are safe. Yeah, this is one of them. But it's in a nice way. It's in a way with grace and dignity and integrity. And that is how you want to be in the world. Okay. So the last step,
scripted. So we're big believers in writing it out, whether writing it out longhand, typing it out, reading it.
Our students right now are in like the depths of doing this, but there is such value in it. There is such value. And I'm going to go back into my education roots right now. It's so important to do it in these different modalities, to write it down. It makes it concrete. It makes it real. You can revamp it and change it. Speaking it out loud, speaking especially to this group. It is very important that you speak this out loud, and you speak it out loud many, many times. You allow yourself to cry when you say it the first and second and maybe third. You do it until you can say it without getting that emotional, just having that emotional break.
Just feeling in control.
Yes.
I think, and we would never say that if your voice cracked or something. I mean, whose voice wouldn't crack when they're talking about a serious illness or a death?
Right.
But it's that exactly what you said, that feeling like, okay, I can get through this. I can get through this confidently and in one piece.
And this does work if you practice it. We have worked with thousands of women now that have had to navigate these things. And when they practice it, it's successful and it's impactful, and it actually can make you memorable on an interview.
And the other benefit of practicing is that when you're in an interview, there are so many things going on. I mean, you've got to get a child, maybe childcare, and you're in a new place and you've got new shoes on, and there's so much stress. You are letting yourself off the hook a little bit if you practice and kind of memorize what you're going to say. Not verbatim, but memorize it enough so that you don't have to think about it. It's one less thing to think about.
And if you can find somebody that you can do this with, that you can practice with it and get feedback from them, it can be really, really helpful, but you want to pick the right person.
Well, you were talking today on our call. Actually about like even just getting on Zoom and filming, or using your camera, filming yourself so you can see how you deliver it, which is a great way just to kind of practice. Whenever we're doing public speaking, we just do it in the car. It used to be weird 10 years ago, and there wasn't Bluetooth, because I'd be driving down the car talking.
Yes.
And now everybody just thinks I'm talking to, you.
Totally. It's always a good time filming yourself. God, yeah. Okay. So we can go to that last slide. I think
that's it.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah. Okay.
so but we will say a few things here. So you've heard us mention our course. We do offer courses, we offer webinars. You can get all the information on our programs at www.preparetolaunchu with that U. You can see our little icons on there. We're everywhere. Kelley mentioned our that Mom Talk Projects YouTube channel where we've done some long form workshops. We have our own YouTube channel, which has very short form, choppy, like, 5 to 10 minute lessons on things that are very specific. So you can look through that library and say, gee, I really want to practice that resume gap or how to close out an interview. You can click on that.
Yeah, we were saying to our students today, we were saying go and pull up because somebody was asking about compensation.
Yeah.
It's like
how to answer the how much do you want to make question.
It's like go listen to that before you go on this interview. 5 minutes. So okay.
All right, so we are all yours for questions.
Great. Well, I know we have a lot of questions in the comments, but we did have some pre-submitted questions, so we'll get started with those first.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great.
Okay, the first one. Are you able to address how one might tackle an extensive career gap that's due to a disability?
Well, we just did. I mean, so you're going to follow that self-care protocol for that one, for sure.
So you're mining, you're really looking at what have I done? And
you're thinking of the patient as not being you, but someone else. You're almost like speaking in the third person. Okay.
Yeah.
I will say if it was 2 years or less, there's no need to. If it's longer, you need to address it.
Yes, absolutely. And you've done valuable work. There are transferable skills in living through a disability. There are very transferable skills.
Yeah,
absolutely. Aside from only applying to jobs specific to returnships, how can I best apply for other jobs listed when I have a long gap in my work history?
Well, I'm going to assume that this person is applying online using ATS or job boards. And I would say the first thing you can do is not do that. You have the typical American who has an unconventional resume and no gaps and no unexplainable kind of moves in their work history only has a 20% chance of getting a job through applying online. Your chances are 10% or less. So you just don't want to spend time there. You want to spend time networking. You want to talk to people, because once people hear your story, if you deliver it the way we just taught you, they're going to be sold. They're going to want to advocate for you. They're going to want to help you get in somewhere. Returnships are great. They're a great place for someone who wants to build the confidence, perhaps someone who's pivoting and needs to gain some new skills. But don't assume because you have a career gap that you need a returnship. Those are unique to certain populations, but we see every day. And when we have hundreds of people go through our programs every year, and 60% of them have jobs within 2 months of graduating from our program. And the average, what's the average? Is it 14 or 16? I think 16-year gap average. Yep. So it happens. And right now, guys, the job market, I mean, people need you. The credentialing, all those lists of all the things that they want for every job, they're taking people with 30 or 40% of it because the labor market is tight and the job market is really generous.
So it's really thinking strategically about how you are applying, using the job board as a place to mine for information, and then going and using your networking to help you get the job.
And we did a mom project on LinkedIn networking, I believe, in the summer. So you can probably find that on their YouTube page.
And here's the thing. And then once, so maybe you go off and you get a job that way, you're first, out of the gate after your 16-year career break. And then you can go back to some of these platforms then, because you will beat the algorithm. You'll be able to land the jobs that way.
How do you return to work when you are doing a career change from education to human resources with no actual human resource experience?
Oh, that's a good question.
So we've had a few. We just today, Sonia.
Yeah.
So I think we have to look at experience in 2 buckets. There's one where it's hard experience, where I have had the title of human resources. I've worked in a human resources department. And then there's the soft. I've done things that are related to human resources. So in education, if I don't know if this person was a teacher or an administrator, but let's say that there was some experience where she was training, doing mentorship of other teachers, training or working with a student teacher. That's the learning and development side.
Like go mine every committee that you are on.
Right.
For human resource, like you did it.
Were you on a search committee?
Yeah.
Were you doing reviews of other people or sitting on
planning professional development?
Right.
Were you, gathering, like, were you on one of the strategic budgeting committees where you were looking at things like,
payroll, benefits,
yeah.
compensation and benefits. So do that. And know this, I mean, the reality is you're not going to go in as a middle level person. You're going to go in as entry level, and you have to be okay with that. We would recommend that before you do that, before you make that determination that you're going to create your resume and your LinkedIn and all your pitches for an HR job, that you do a little bit of exploring and assessing first. Talk to people in the role. You'll find plenty of educators who've moved from the education into HR, and find out how it went, find out how they did it. This is where networking can really be helpful, not in asking for connections into a company, but just getting information.
Yeah.
And we definitely did a workshop on that called Finding Your Fit, I think it was called.
Yeah, I think so.
So you can find a little bit more information on how to.
You're all going to be binge watching the Mom Project.
Yeah, Mom Project, your numbers are going to go way up.
This one and this one and this one. Okay. How do you overcome all the job rejections when you were applying for jobs?
I know.
Well, I'll start, but I think this is more your wheelhouse. I would just say, first, just look at the way you're doing it. If you're applying online, you're going to get probably 90 to 95% of the time rejections or postings.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you're doing it other ways, rejection is just part of the process. Do you want to talk about that?
So I think number one, just allowing yourself to feel the sting of rejection. I mean, we all have experienced it, and no one likes it. It stinks. It's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling. And so you have to take really good care of yourself when you are navigating the job seeking process. You absolutely have to. And so very basic things. How is your personal self-care? Are you getting enough sleep, enough rest? Are you making sure that when you do feel that sting of rejection, that you are sharing it with somebody who's not going to compile it and make it worse for you and tell you how, it's all going horribly? Because sometimes we can do that. We can surround ourselves with people and it just makes it grow. So it's actually even saying, like, I'll give you an example. If I were to say it to my husband, I might say to him, oh my God, I just need to, like, siphon this off of me, because it feels so heavy. I do not want you to fix this or change it or try to make it better. I just have to get it out of my mouth. This is so overwhelming. This is so frustrating and overwhelming. And I feel, and you can cry, you can have your moment, and then you can invite them to say, you're going to ask them, so, like, just reality check me for a second here. Am I really a loser? Like, am I really just not making this happen for myself or not? Exactly. And what are they going to say to you? But it's, you are managing the conversation, and you're not finding that that compiling kills us, makes it worse, and it keeps you stuck. But you have to siphon it off. You cannot walk around this planet without acknowledging that rejection stinks and hurts. But if you do it, you will move through it, and then you will be better on the other side of it to begin again, to start it all up again.
And once you get,
and you'll be wiser.
That's for sure.
You'll be wiser.
And one way to add to your wisdom and to behave after you've siphoned it off and you kind of got your footing again is to look and say, okay, what could I have done better? Maybe it's going back. If you do have a relationship with a recruiter, to say, hey, thank you so much. I'm really proud of myself for making it through the first 3 interviews. Can you give me some input as to what could have helped me advance to the 4th?
Exactly.
What was missing? All right. And also allowing yourself, and you kind of hit it on it when you said give yourself the grace of recognizing. We had a student the other day, one of our military spouses, who made it through 5 rounds of interviews and didn't get the job. And all she was focusing on was that she didn't get the job. Yeah. And we were like, Wesley, think of all the people that you beat out to get the first interview. And then the second, there were probably 750 applicants and you made it down to the last 4.
Right.
Give yourself credit for the little steps in the process.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. All such great points.
Yeah.
Do employers look for Coursera, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, or other schools' platforms as a way to demonstrate those skills without on-the-job experience?
Not really, but with the caveat being, when you create your resume, we recommend doing just a basic skills section where you talk about, the 6 to 8 things that are really in your wheelhouse, and you should put under your technical skills, not I did Udemy or I did Coursera, but I learned Microsoft Excel, I learned advanced PowerPoint, I learned Salesforce, whatever you've learned. So in terms of technical skills, they have value. But no, if you took like a course on like maybe a high-level project management course or a course on managing under stress. Those things, unfortunately, don't really have any real value for a hiring manager.
For a hiring manager, they have a ton of value
For you.
for you.
Mhm.
Because that is a huge
Yes.
confidence booster. If
Yes.
you can speak in an educated way about these things, that is just going to inform your confidence, and that's going to shine through in your networking and your
For sure.
interviews.
For sure.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It looks like we have some more too.
Oh yeah, we have some more. I think we're going into the chat questions now,
Okay.
which has been quite active. Okay. Julia asks, what is the better way to present a move to another country and taking the time to learn English break?
That's a great one.
Really good.
So
We have a lot of students like
would you say her name was Julia? Yeah, Julia.
Mhm.
Julia, first of all, in your first statement at the top of your resume, you need to mention that you're bilingual or trilingual if that's what you are.
Mhm.
That should be like the first or second word on your resume. Okay.
Yeah.
And then that can be something that you talk about in the interview. If you don't have a lot of things to talk about your break, you could say that you coordinated a cross Atlantic move. I guess that would be
Yes.
specific, or whatever. I don't know where you went,
Mhm.
but or where you were coming from, but that you coordinated that move, and that may be something that's worth a bullet in your resume. But the takeaway for the employer is that you have cross-cultural experience and that you're bilingual, and those two words need to be somewhere at the top of your resume.
Yes, all of the logistics that go into planning a move. Okay, Tina asks, does a gap include contract work? I have a 2-year gap and have been doing contract work for a number of years. How do I explain wanting to go back full time?
Oh, that's a great one.
Yes.
This is a lot.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is an easy one, Tina.
Yes.
All you're going to say,
winning with contract work.
yeah,
Yes.
all you're going to say, first of all, contract work counts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's harder.
Start there.
But I think one way to explain it would be, I pivoted from full-time work into contract work, and I really enjoyed it for that time of my life. It suited me, the flexibility. But as you know, from hiring contractors, it's kind of feast or famine. It's all or nothing. So there's not that continuity. But more importantly, when you're a project worker, you're not there to see the big win at the end. You do your little piece and then you're on to the next project.
Mhm.
And it's really important for me to see the work that I've done and the final outcome. So for that reason, I'm really looking to go back in-house in a full-time capacity. And then lastly, it's really lonely being a contractor. You're in, you're out. It's a lot of that downtime. And after 2 years of COVID, I'm even more excited to be in a place where I can collaborate and be part of a team.
Yeah.
Sell it.
Even if it's not all true.
Absolutely.
I could do that one.
Okay, this is our last audience question. What should be shared in a cover letter?
That's another one we can do.
Mhm.
But there's a simple template.
Yeah.
First of all, it's very short at the beginning and it's direct. It could be, let's say, Elizabeth, you referenced me.
Mhm.
My friend Elizabeth works at your company and thinks it's great, and she suggested I apply for this job. And then it's a slightly general statement, like, as you can see from my resume, I have, and then list a couple of the skills they say in the job posting. I have excellent process engineering skills, certainly have the academic record, and specifically, and then that's 3 or 4 bullets that are not just restatements of what's on your resume. They go a little deeper. So you might have said on your resume that you project managed the transition from a manual billing process to an automated. And then in that bullet, you're going to say, I took a process that took 14 man hours down to 2 and give it a little more color. And 3 bullets that directly relate to what they're saying they want. And then you close it at the end. Thank you very much. I look forward to speaking with you. If I don't hear back from you in 2 weeks, I'll be reaching out. Something like that. All right. Another little tip on cover letters. Not everybody wants one, but if you want your resume to be seen with a cover letter, and I'm going to, again, avoid the job board, although it does work this way too. You're giving it to people. Just take your cover letter and attach it to your resume so that it's one multi-page PDF, so that when it goes out, you have the opportunity of introducing you before they look at your resume.
Owning that narrative.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this concludes today's session. Thank you, audience, for your insightful questions. And thank you, Susan and Kelley. This has been a wonderful masterclass. We hope that you have learned something that you can take with your career search today and beyond. As a reminder, a recording of the session will be made available. Thank you all, and we'll see you at the next one. Have a great day.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.